Hello and welcome to Wonkette's Weekend Live Chat. I'm Robin Panaccia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen E. Robinson.
Hello,
I'm so
Rob.
used to calling you SER in uh, chat.
Hey, Robin. As always, let's hop right into this while my wife is still listening. So, you wrote an article for Wonkette last week called Marjorie Taylor Greene is White Trash is Bad, and James Carville should feel bad. And I noticed a lot of the responses to your piece felt strongly about using this classist,
Yes.
racist slur. So, before we actually start, can we just listen to what Carville actually said? Because it
Yeah.
actually has several layers of grossness.
Or maybe just do the darn thing. But it also seemed to expose exactly what the president's up against. Was that a bad moment for Republicans?
Well, I told people I have a PhD in white trashology, and you saw real white trash on display. And let me say something about Congressman Marjorie Taylor Greene. She dresses like white trash. She really needs a fashion consultant. Could I recommend George Santos? He could do a good job of dressing up where she doesn't announce her white trashdom by her own clothes.
So there's the added zinger there about George Santos, the joke, I guess, that Santos
Yeah,
was a
it's
drag
like,
queen.
hey, let's just throw some homophobia. There are so many things wrong with George Santos and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and that's the well that they go to. Like,
And most of the defenses, which we can get to later, I will read a few. I don't buy any of them, but it's sort of that it's okay to call a human being trash in the great Berman tradition. Not a great historical tradition of dehumanizing people this way. It's okay to call her trash because she's a horrible person. She's a terrible human being. She's racist. She's transphobic. Um, both are things that actually Carville is not addressing, nor many people have addressed. What they point out is that she's rude by booing the president or heckling the president, which a lot of average people don't find that awful. And she dresses badly, like she dresses like Peg Bundy. That's trash. I admit I liked the outfit. I thought it was fine. But even the hosts on The View are sort of fixating on the ensemble.
I was distracted by Marjorie Taylor Greene's jacket.
Oh my God!
It looked like she skinned my puppy.
Yeah.
I was very. Alyssa, I will. Yeah, there's Herbie not being pleased by this look.
It was like a little Cruella de Vil.
Wait, Alyssa, I will take.
and let's not forget who Alyssa Peregrine is, by the way. Like, you're going to
Yes.
be like, I'm criticizing people who spread conspiracy theories.
Yeah, that's Alyssa Peregrine. She's Trump's White House communications director until December 2020. She cannily jumped off that sinking ship and has now set herself up as a soft MAGA critic on CNN and now is on The View. I'll say this about her.
Her dad did WorldNet Daily. Her dad is like the captain in charge. He started a lot of this stuff. He's the guy who started WorldNet Daily, which was like, back in the day, like the pro-Iraq war, but also crazy conspiracy person site. Very like Tea Party. It's where, so much of the crazy originated, really. So, fuck that, like, does not have room to talk of all the people.
Yeah, and as I said before, I'm biased. I like the jacket. It's classic supervillain, but that's not really the point. Green is a very powerful and dangerous person, and I think there's this bipartisan consensus among many liberals and mainstream Republicans that she's too beneath them to take seriously. So let's just talk about how trashy she is. I don't know how much worse you have to do in rural parts of the country before you realize that's a bad idea. Green is not even technically white trash. She's college educated and comes from money. If you're a Southerner, as I am, you can recognize her accent. It's clearly not even that rural. So it just seems as if you're inclined to think all Southerners are inbred hillbillies, you won't make the distinction. I think also because of that, because people think all accents are the same, they sort of see James Carville talking about her and assume, oh, it's somewhat vaguely Southern. He's sort of making fun of someone who's in his same class, when it's really sort of like Prince Charles hitting someone who's a Cockney. That's kind of really that's really mean and cruel. We should not be doing that. Marjorie Taylor Greene is someone has posted here. Marjorie Taylor Greene is upper middle class only because of her family wealth and business. Culturally, socially, philosophically, she is white trash, which is just, I don't know how to tell you how it winds up, you sound, this is stuff I heard all the time. And I was told when I say nigger, I like to use the word, 'cause that's what I was told at 10. When I say this word, I'm not talking about you, Stephen. I'm talking about people who are in the list, all these negative traits that sort of de facto believe is all Black people, which is not actually true. That's your own bigotry and racism.
And the good traits are always traits that are associated with like middle to upper class white people. Like those are that's when you're good. Like, no, you're one of the good ones. You are just like, Black people, they're just like us. I mean, we've got the same thing to some degree where, we've got Guidos and people are very like, hackled up about that. The thing is, it's respectability politics. And within every group, there's, this idea of the good classy ones and then the bad ones who are, usually poor. Like it's generally almost exclusively associated with poverty, like to some degree in terms of, even if we're just talking about, aesthetics, they're talking about aesthetics, behavior, things that we associate with people who do not have a certain amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, someone had also commented, y'all are refusing to use a tool we could use to win. And to me, that's sort of the political equivalent of saying I drive better when I'm drunk. Like this does not work. Democrats are losing voters they need. And you can call these people deplorable and white trash and whatever, but you need these votes. And I think there's an insistence on not even acknowledging that. So like when the governor's race was lost in Virginia, the focus was on some suburban flipping or not enough Democrats turning out. But you looked in rural areas, the margins were astronomical. Like we were getting crushed at astronomical levels. So you can't sort of dismiss rural areas. If you actually look at how Warnock won in Georgia, it was because he was holding some of those margins down. He was actually, and not just amongst, because Black people live in rural areas, it's like across the board. Because if you can't just dismiss an entire culture of people and hope that they will then vote for you, that this just isn't how anything works. And there's this kind of contempt for the voters that you could argue Marjorie Taylor Greene is a bigot and mean and terrible, but you're not focusing on that. You're now helping her narrative as the person the elite and the powerful have nothing but contempt for, and she's standing up against the mean girls. Because I'm sorry, that View clip was just mean girl oriented. Like we see in every movie.
There are so many worse things about this woman than, the fact that she wore a jacket that people don't like. It's actually stunning to me that people are like, yes, that is, and I'm obnoxious about fashion. I fully admit that. But not in this way. Like it's not, it was very much done in a punching down way. And we should never be, we should never be punching down. It's never going to work out well. We should always be punching up, even in terms of our criticism, because there are, we should be criticizing, the amount of power that she has, the way that she's convincing people to believe batshit crazy things. That's punching up.
Oh yeah.
It's punching down to criticize someone's outfit, to, make a comment about how she needs a gay man to come dress her, which is also homophobic. Like, let's throw some homophobia in there. This will really just make us seem very attractive as humans.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I
let's call
I
her white
had
trash,
I had written about recently seeing a production of Cabaret, and I think something that always stands out is that originally the MC and the other are making fun of Nazis, like Heil Hitler, and doing the goose stepping. And often people watch that as being, oh, they're being edgy and crazy. Well, no, early on, this looks effing ridiculous. So of course you're going to make fun of it. It's not like they're being edgy. It's more of like, this is stupid. Look how these idiots goose step. Look at this guy with a silly mustache. And it's only later when, the camps and the death that you're like, oh my God, you're making fun of. So I want to avoid, like, 20 years later, there's this sort of version of now when you show clips of people making fun of the woman who, are like ruling the world with an iron fist over how she's dressed. It makes you look kind of silly. And, look, I've made fun of Kristen Sinema's outfits as well and others. And I think part of that is that I'm not saying that it's trash. Also, that a lot of people, I tried, as you were saying, it's punching up with the idea of someone, a rich and powerful person looking silly and being silly. If you wanted to do that about Greene, fine, but they're not. You're sort of associating it with a term. Mm-hmm. And I felt a lot of people try to be too cute by half in your article and pretended they'd never heard this term used to describe dirt poor people who are barely surviving. And it is that I grew up in the South. I knew that's how that term is used to describe people who are barely getting by. And what power they have is the vote. And I don't know, like, there was the sort of the usual kind of trolls who would come after you about, as you mentioned, I guess, defund the police. And I don't see those as sort of similar. Defund the police, I would compare more to, as far as slogans go and success, and we can discuss. We're going to do a different chat after this about the police effectiveness. But I would compare that more to how Republicans actively attack public education and getting rid of public schools or whatever. Because no one is talking about, like, the police as trash or garbage. God forbid you would ever do that. That would be finished politically. So that to me is sort of apples and oranges.
What I was going more for there was, there's so much policing of what those of us on the left say, and everything we do. Oh my God, you're gonna there's like a lot of noise. Oh my God, you're gonna ruin all of our yes, Chav is another one. But you're gonna make everything bad for us. They're gonna be able to use it against us. But they, like, the moderates do way more shit that people are actually, like, legitimately mad at and legitimately able to weaponize so much better than anything we're saying. But by far, like, the whole, like, actually we do like to be elitist thing, people like that and they're very into it. If we make fun of people for being white trash and we say that all of these people are bad, they'll stop being bad because they want to sit next to us at the cafeteria. They'll be embarrassed. That does not happen. It doesn't happen.
No, because there was pushback against Bernie Sanders saying at the end of the campaign in 2016 he didn't believe all people considering voting for Trump were racist by default or sexist, and there was pushback against that, even though I found that strange because that was something that Biden or Joe Manchin, any white moderate, frankly, it's not necessarily a crazy progressive is saying. That was sort of, yes, you don't say that everyone voting for your opponent is a racist or sexist. That is a bad idea.
I just wanted to bring that up because it's a very good point there. Go ahead, sorry.
So I, so it wasn't. It's if you're calling everyone in a group racist or sexist, and you've pointed this out before, like the weird thing about the 2016 campaign was this, the point of Democrats, they collectively were saying we live in a sexist, institutionally sexist and racist society. So if that is true, that means that it's not just 10% of the population that might be racist or sexist. So you are having to get the votes. You can fix it. You're going to have to get the votes of people who are perhaps racially, racist or sexist, or at least have those views. It doesn't mean that you have to appeal to those views, but you can't just insult them, because what will happen is they will vote against. But you say that people think that, oh, I want to be a good person, so you told me I'm racist.
Yeah, I think that's the idea behind it.
But that's just not the pattern. It doesn't happen. What happens is we've seen it repeatedly.
Yeah.
So we've seen more effect of that rhetoric backfiring, and people want, whatever you might have said happened in 2020, this narrative that the defund the police argument. And again, I've always been agnostic about it. And I know there's some trolls who, if you even mention it, it's like Beetlejuice with them. They come out the woodwork. I've been agnostic. All I observe is that my recollection in 2020 is that Joe Biden won the presidency. We won the Senate, and we held the House, but we lost some seats in the House, which you could also attribute to those being pretty tough seats we had been lucky to win in 2018 because of general contempt for Trump. If you want to look at a complete disaster electorally, that would be 2016. And when you can look at where we lost in rural areas and losing Ohio and Florida and Iowa, and the argument has been, rather than like maybe calling people deplorables was a mistake, it is no, it's all Jill Stein, or all of these people were racist and sexist and are irredeemable even when they were voting for Barack Obama. So none of that makes sense. So that's all I point out. It's like, well, some of your dogma makes no sense to me. But I think a lot of the dogmatic people, we see a lot of them on social media and the Wonkette comments as well. But you can't strictly reason with dogma. But my point is, none of that is actually effective. Look at what has happened in the Democratic Party, the blows we've lost. It is clearly not effective to sort of join forces with the people who have been chased out of the Republican Party.
Yeah, because I do feel like Democrats have always sort of been like about the like snobby rich Republicans, like that, like they're like, those are the people we really want because they're so classy, I guess. I don't know, but there's always been that contingent where they're like, we admit that they're better than us and that, more popular, and they're actually not even liked in their own country,
Going back to Carville. So Carville, Louisiana, by the way, is a town named after James Carville's grandfather. That would perhaps imply that he is, when he talks about having a PhD in white trashology, perhaps he is not saying that which is sort of a weird gorillas in the mist term as well. But to say that you have this PhD in this, it's not like, because, and I personally grew up in the rural South with working class, quote unquote, you might call them trailer trash or whatever. I know that was a term for them. I grew up around those people. I still don't use that term. But from his standpoint, it sounds like he's from the people, again, I grew up with, who look down on those people from a class standpoint. There were several steps removed. And it's not just to have some sort of, again, that's been something that constantly comes up from certain trolls, that I have some personal vendetta against James Carville. He was successful in the 90s. I am a big fan of The Light and Diggable Planets. However, I'm not sure Lady Miss Kier or Ladybug are sort of experts on pop music right now and should be interviewed, and we should be like figuring out how do we, the next step that we should do, they should be lecturing, say, Beyonce or something. I mean, maybe that's a bad idea. Carville's wife is famously the Republican strategist, Madeline.
Madeline, yeah.
And she is also terrible. I mean, she is sort of right there, perhaps with Ginny Thomas. I know she was against Trump, but again, because she's considered, the quote was that his high school antics towards women. I just want to clarify, Robin, that when I was in high school, I was never accused of raping women. I don't think this is a high school issue. I think it is more that Trump is sexually assaulted, is accused of sexually assaulting women. I want to play a couple clips from this person from the glory days pre-Trump, where apparently no one was rude and crude like our Marjorie Taylor Greene and so forth.
He didn't include any of those Republican ideas. He had majorities in both chambers, and he jammed through his own agenda. And his campaign was marked by malice. His campaign was marked by malice and mendacity. It was full of derision and division and destruction and distraction and distortion. I don't see how he can, and how anyone would trust him, even Democrats.
Let's let Van respond to that.
He has no mandate for anything.
Well, I think it's not true he doesn't have a mandate. He said.
Just so people who remember
the notoriously unpleasant Barack Obama,
and there are still Republicans who the Obama's crime in 2012 was literally trying to win re-election. Like that was apparently.
Well, it was rude, Stephen. It was rude.
He exploited the obvious weaknesses of his opponent, Mitt Romney, and capitalized it, leveraged it, and whooped his ass. And that was so terrible. So of course, Democrats have only themselves to blame. Republican voters would later turn to Donald Trump instead of giving it another shot with someone like Jeb Bush or whatever. And here's another sort of really racist rant.
So I don't take that back.
I did listen to it. And at the end, you said, what do I tell the kids? What I would tell your kids, I'm a black man in America who went to Yale, who's written books, who served a president, now has a
I'm a
TV
ninth
job.
generation American, ma'am, and I'm the first one in my family born with all my rights. I'm a ninth generation American. And so we have not escaped because I went to Yale.
You should
all
not
the
be a
problems of this country.
racial polemicist. You should be a racial reconciler.
You should be ashamed of yourself to say that to me to my face. I've spent more time in this country.
Would I say it behind your back would be better?
Listen, hold on a second. I've spent more time than you have trying to be a racial reconciler in this country.
Really? How do you know that? Do you know anything about it? Do you know anything about
So
freaking chutzpah it takes to say that to a person's face. I don't even.
Well, yeah, I mean, she is. If you want to call people trashy, perhaps you would start with that, or the idea of Greene is not the first to really be rude, really be offensive, really be terrible. I mean, I think people try to forget. I think perhaps glorify these pre-Trump days.
Yeah.
But people like Madeline were amongst the worst. And look, Carville's free to marry whoever he wants, and if they're happy. I mean, I'm not going to say that his wife is trash or that he has a terrible haircut in that last clip. I mean, that's her own business. But I think,
or that his outfit was not great. I mean, he's going on. That's not the thing I would wear to go on television and talk about someone else's outfit, is what I am saying.
He's a man, Robin, so that makes everything.
If I'm going to criticize someone's outfit, I'm going to look cute or I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, so Carville and Madeline are famously apparently never talk politics at home. Sort of the luxury of well-off white people who are not personally impacted by their party's policies. And they've appeared in commercials together that play up their sort of wacky sitcom dynamic. And Carville in the 1993 War Room documentary commented sort of how kind of compares them to sort of the cantankerous country couple who cancel out each other's votes at the polls and go home and have dinner. And arguably that itself is this very sort of elitism that sent voters into the arms of MAGA politicians like Greene, especially even Trump, because they don't pretend this is all a game. So Greene doesn't talk about her friends across the aisle, because why would you be friends with people you claim are pedophiles? So Greene is actually very consistent with, like, this is real. So when Greene asks, I need money from you, my fellow, my supporters, to stop the evil Democrats, we know she's not playing, sheepdog and whatever, that cartoon where you clock in, punch clock villainy. She's not playing that game. Whereas, I get tons of these very high alarm, storm and drink fundraising, and I think very poor people get them as well. That often bothers me. Of like, your life is at risk. Republicans are coming for you. Give us money. Give us money. Give us money. And then, your rights are at stake. This is what's going to happen. And then, I remember Kristen Gillibrand talking about how Marco Rubio is one of her buddies and a joy to work with. I'm like, really? That asshole? Like, it's this sort of the whole country club attitude only appeals to people who of a certain kind of social class who go to the country club. Right?
Who have a certain amount of immunity to being, affected by politics, because they have enough money and that money protects them.
Greene and AOC, I think, are in that sense of, no, the other guys are really bad actors. We don't really want to be buddies with them. I think Greene often is not invited to the country club, perhaps for classist reasons. AOC is not invited into the country club by many, mainstream Democrats, and certainly not Republicans for obvious reasons. But this is not that sort of country club appeal. It's like, it is not working. I don't know why.
It's also not appealing to people. There was a thing I saw this week about, we've talked before about Nikki Haley and how, a certain group of Democrats are like, oh man, we are so in trouble if Nikki Haley ever decides to run for president. She's got like 2% right now. No, we're not in trouble if Nikki Haley ever decides to run for president. They're not going to vote for her. They think that she's too normal and not a true believer. But there is this idea, I think, among the establishment parts of like both parties, that they know what is appealing to people, but they're also very wrong about what is appealing to people. And I don't like that. Marjorie Taylor Greene is appealing to a group of people. There are reasons for this, and they're not great reasons. But people a lot of the time prefer fucked up honesty to, bullshit, I guess, like bullshit niceness, or, propriety. And I also think that a lot of the time when, people are gone after in that way, where they're dragged for being, failing to do respectability politics on whatever level, people tend to gather closer to them. It's sort of a human nature kind of thing. It's why I genuinely like Tanya Harding. I'm like, Team Tanya Harding, fuck all of you, fuck Nancy Kerrigan. But when you see people being gone after, and to the point where it starts to feel unfair, is when it's just something clicks a lot of the time in certain people, and they're like, well, fine, I'm just going to defend this to the death. It's a strange phenomenon, but it happens, and it happens more often. It creates a sense of solidarity between people, and it happens a lot more often than people who are not necessarily affected, or people who are going to be made to feel bad in that kind of way can really understand.
No, absolutely. I think attacking the voters is never good, and Republicans are very good at. They don't necessarily do aspirational politics, as you call it. So they are the voter. I am part of the voters. I am that. George Santos had adopted that, the idea of, well, I won't be told to sit in the back of the Congress, alluding to the back of the bus. And that is appealing to certain people, they don't like being, they feel like there's been some sort of group of powerful people telling them what to do for a long time, and they're sort of
And there has been, like, for a fact, there has been. The problem is most of those people were Republicans.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's sort of also interesting. I mean, it came up that you were talking about with punching down and everything, and I feel like when someone, because Fox News had included the View clip, people mocking them, and someone had responded, it's like, oh, come on, Whoopi Goldberg grew up poor. And it's one of those things of just a lot of, I find sometimes liberals will do this, and I try to, Whoopi Goldberg has not been poor in a very long time.
Yeah.
Like when someone won an Oscar when, Pete Buttigieg was 8, maybe that person is now part of the elite, and so, and this happens with a lot of our, leaders. So someone is like, how can you judge Clyburn grew up poor? And it's like, well, he's also been part of someone growing up in South Carolina, if they're white, the quote unquote trailer trash. If you can remind them that, oh, this guy was very poor a long time ago, for them, look, as long as I've been alive, this guy has been powerful. And now you're calling me a racist for not thinking that he somehow is clearly in a higher class than I am. So I think that there is a disconnect from that, this idea of trying to, and also like just to, I feel like there is so much of that kind of, as you say, sort of wanting to be part of this aristocracy, wanting to be better than other people. I mean, I see this a lot.
Well, I feel like they want to be the Heathers. Like they want to be like the snobby people in an 80s movie. And they feel like it seems like that to me, like where they're like, you can't sit at our table. And then people are all desperate to sit at their table. Like that's not really how things generally tend to work. If you sit, like, I think as adults, when someone's like, you can't sit with us, people immediately go to like, their internal reaction is always going to be fuck you. Like, you can't, at some point, these people are going to be left with no one they feel is, good enough to be in the Democratic Party. Like they're just like they don't want the left. They don't want, people in the Midwest. They don't want, because, everyone in the Midwest is a racist white man who works in a factory and wears flannel. Because like literally everyone here, it's amazing. Even I am, I'm wearing a flannel right now in my soul. There's all these people that are not good enough, and we have to make fun of them, and we have to, be like absolute snobs. And then there's going to be like 5 people left who are good enough. And I don't know that that's a really good way to like win elections.
A lot of these folks are just insufferably annoying. I mean, I think that's a challenge that liberals have, that we can be insufferably annoying. And it's sort of something like a blind spot I try to fix in myself, and maybe others should as well, because I've seen folks out there online, again, in our comment, and I'm like, wow, if you were a canvasser, I slammed the door in your face, or I don't want to, you're an incredibly obnoxious person, and not, someone who writes, plays, whatever. You're kind of the person that Jane Austen would send up as superly ridiculous, like, the Duke of Stupid, that kind of character. And in so much of it is this sort of arrogance. Something that I think is interesting, because you've written about, there'll be sort of, what's a Twitter? Who's a celebrity? Why should I have to know? I don't even. I'm
oh God.
Television, and it's deliberate. It's trying to like those Marvel movies. I know why, and you just sound like a jackass. Whereas
I don't even own a TV.
But and if you think about this, Republicans don't do. You don't see Charlie Kirk, even to a certain degree, they don't do that. They're not they don't lead with who's this pop star who dresses. Who's this guy? It's like, no.
What's a Beyonce?
No, like this is Beyonce is powerful and going to reign Satanism, and this musician is a Satanist or whatever. They acknowledge an awareness of pop culture and they attack it, as opposed to even you used to write about QAnon before we wound up with QAnon members of Congress. And I swear at the time, and it wasn't necessarily, even some of this was before I started at Wonkette, but there'd be people who would be like, oh, why should I bother? These idiots, these losers. And it's like, well, no, this is a growing thing that's important to know about. And even something that seems silly is like going to be potentially an issue that we should
can't just dismiss everything because it's, oh, that's stupid. A lot of people like stupid things, like, or, a lot of people like, I don't personally like the idea of differentiating between high and low art, but, because you know what, I like opera and also The Real Housewives. Like, I think we should all contain multitudes. Whenever you do that, or when you do the, oh my God, someone spelled something incorrectly. Can you believe it? Oh my, get me the smelling salts. You look like an asshole. Like, you look like an asshole. No one likes people who correct people's spelling or who, put down the things that they like in a way that is not even fucking necessary. And people think that this is so appealing. It blows my mind. Like, in my life, I've never had someone correct something that I said in a mean way and be like, wow. Oh, I never want to disappoint that incredible person again. Again, my immediate reaction is, fuck you. Like, it's
no, yeah. That type of politics isn't necessarily going to win friends and influence people. So I don't recommend it.
One thing I did want to get back to is the way that, people were very much doubling down on, we got to call this is how we win. We need to fight like they do. We need to really fight and call people white trash. It's the same thing I felt, and I think some other people brought it up in the comments. Oh, I think I may have also included it in the article, but when people were, oh, it's okay that we call Donald Trump fat and make fun of him for being fat. That's effective. Which, no, it's not. And it's not because he's a good person. It's because there are other people in the world who are way more likely to see that than he is.
Well, it's not how anything works. And maybe because I write, fiction and stuff like that, it's just the scene where where someone makes fun of the guy because he's fat, even if he's otherwise been led to not like him.
Yeah.
You're going to feel sorry for that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's mean. I'm a fat person, or I struggle with my weight, and oh, you've made this person relatable. Like, that's the scene where the bad girl sits down and maybe cries, and like, oh, okay, well, I get this character now. So, and I've said this before with the Green, you're sort of, when you're reinforcing narratives, or you're trying to make people look more human, that's not, how is that effective? Like, oh, he eats his steak like all these people I'm trying to desperately appeal to in the Midwest or across the country. Or like the guy, frankly, like the idea of a president serving Big Macs to people is sort of relatable. Like, there are movies where that's
is that, that was one of the things that was actually appealing about Bill Clinton. Like, you're like, oh, he's going to McDonald's every day, and people were like, yes, good for him. We like that. People are, I don't know. People like that and find that more appealing than they do, someone, I know Bill Clinton is a vegan now, than someone talking about veganism. Like, no one wants to hear anything about veganism. Not even other vegans, I don't think. And, people, there was a lot of this that people were saying that, no, We don't mean that she's white trash or that she's poor. We mean that she, is white trash for some other reason, and we made up our own definition of it. But everyone knows what people mean by white trash.
Well,
Like
that's
everyone knows, and no one,
it's literally not what Carville said, and also the character thing is no one is calling.
He said her outfit was white trash. So
no one's calling Camilla Parker Bowles white trash. And again, no one called Carville's own wife white trash for the extent of the time that she has been professionally horrible. No one would call her that. So you're sort of it's a little too cute by half. We know what the dig is. And more
I also don't think they would have called her that if she didn't have a Southern accent.
No, I mean, and if you're from the South, I think as I mentioned, if you're from the South, you know that her accent is actually fairly upper middle class. I've had friends from the North who are surprised. So when they come to the South, amongst actual rural people that they would call trailer trash, it's like when you first go to Scotland, like, I guess this is English, right? Like we're speaking the same language. I'm in trouble because I don't have a book to look at to know what this person's telling me. Like it's that different. Like it's that much of a language difference. I've had to sort of translate for Northern some of my, and when I would go to some parts of rural South Carolina with some of my friends. And of course, to me, that sounds normal. That's how people talk. But yes, it's sort of the default that that you're dumb and you're racist and you're awful. And media promotes this idea, right? The idea is that in every special episode of a sitcom is sort of someone who sounds like Marjorie Taylor Greene who's being racist at the store, and her boss who is like maybe Nancy Mace and doesn't have his pronounced accent, comes in and it's like, oh, racism in this store, none of that. But it's like, well, no, it's racism and sexism are institutionalized things that the poorest people in the world aren't inflicting. Like we didn't have slavery because a bunch of quote unquote white trash said, hey, let's enslave Black people. I mean, I think very sophisticated, well-educated people were making the laws and making this possible to do.
No, and there is, I actually brought this up when, we were talking about George Santos. In people's minds, there's a certain amount of safety in wealth, in terms of they assume that people who, are wealthy or who affect the trappings of wealth in some aspect, are more trustworthy, are less likely to be racist, are less likely to be offensive in some way. And so when we do see people like Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene who are, to people's minds, rather than affecting the trappings of, wealth, are more affecting, behaviors and aesthetics that we associate with the poor, then they're like, oh, see, they're also white trash. That counts. But they're still talking about the same thing because it's, you're basically saying they're rich, but they act like a poor person. So therefore.
Exactly. It's sort of why I usually push back on saying that she's not classy or that someone is being not classy, because we're associating essentially kindness with class. And I don't think some of the kindest people I knew were, again, the folks living in the trailers and the real. I mean, these are people who, came to my mother's funeral. And, and part of the tragedy is that, these people are probably voting for Trump and they're, for whatever reason, they're misguided. They could even be racist. Part of the problem with a lot of racism, you do have people who are fundamentally awful, right? Who just hate. And I think that's Greene, right? Her hatred is part of her fuels for bigotry and whatever. But there are people who are actually nice and decent who are led down their darker paths, right? To the behaviors and attitudes and so forth. And I think by lumping them together, when we say that because of where you grew up and how you sound, you're as bad as this person of pure evil, then it's like, okay, I guess there's no way I can redeem myself to you because I do dress this way. I do act, this is, I don't cut my steak the right way. I don't do these things that you say that you're mocking her for
I'm
doing.
not using the right fork.
Yeah, but when you equate class with kindness, that's a mistake. So Marjorie Taylor Greene is not particularly a kind person. She's just completely awful. But then I think we need to focus more on that than perhaps like even her breaking rules of decorum, because that's interesting. Like we tend to come down more on, again, the breaking of country club rules than on there are probably there are probably Republicans who were quote unquote polite, who did not heckle the president, who are still not particularly kind people and are promoting policy.
In many cases causing more damage than someone who is. The other thing with that is, again, actual people who are not, devotees of establishment politics are like, no, good for them. Like, depending on what side they are, where the person is, speaking up. I think there's a very small contingent actually of people who are like, no, everyone should behave well and have, be, wait their turn and only speak when spoken to and blah, blah, blah. But other people like, it's like people like seeing politicians get pied in the face. Like, it's a thing. Like, and we have to recognize that and not pretend that like people don't find that appealing, because they do.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think with an idea when they say like, oh, we wish, why do Republicans, rally behind each other and do something? Well, because again, people like a club where you'll be embraced and respected rather than we're just a club of mean girls. Again, the club of mean girls is not one.
Well, the assumption is that no one wants to join a club that would have them as a member, I think they're like, if we reject everyone will be dying to join us. I think. Like, I think that's where they're going with that.
Siding with Tanya Harding and fuck off to Nancy Kerrigan. Did I hear that correctly? Someone just asked.
Yeah. No, I actually do have good reasons for this. Tanya Harding led a really fucking difficult life. And she, was treated horribly by the skating association and everything because she didn't fit into like the mold of the American princess skater. And they were all like, no, everyone has to be Nancy Kerrigan. She actually tried to leave her abusive husband who arranged the whole deal. And the skating association basically said to her, you're not going to go to the Olympics unless you go back to this man who is abusing you, because you need the stability. And so she did, because she really wanted to go to the Olympics. And then they arranged this. And her thing was that supposedly she didn't report them after the fact. That was what her, supposed crime was. Not that she was in on the planning of it, but that she didn't report it after the fact, which I don't know. I think if your husband is beating the shit out of you, you might be like not super, ready to go and report him to the police for a crime. Like, there's a certain amount of threat there. And the whole thing just felt so, especially because like, that was at a time when, women there was just always like a woman being attacked. There's like, the bad woman of every week. And Tanya Harding was that, person for quite some time. And I eventually was just like, Also, I'm from Massachusetts and my parents went to Lillehammer. And Nancy Kerrigan, not that nice. And also not that classy. I'm not saying anything. I'll tell Stephen later. But, she was not the princess, everyone thought she was. But it's just when someone gets beat on so much, it makes you, certain people are, occasionally feel loyal to them. I was talking this week about how, Roseanne had her stand-up special. I spent so much time when I was younger defending Roseanne, usually against men who were, like, oh my God, her voice and everything she does is horrible. And she grabbed her crotch at the after singing the national anthem, and that's just evil. And so I was like, I am fully Team Roseanne for so many years, and that's why her being terrible broke my heart so much. But we have to be careful to not be shitty to people in ways that endear them to people, like to others, I think.
Yeah, I think I will close it with that. I guess I'm having mic problems. I'll get another mic, and I'm actually offended that anyone would think I'd use a phone mic enough that I'm going to end.
I'm using a phone mic.
I'm sorry, Robin.
And I'm not the one having problems, am I?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So we'll join each other again in a bit for a bonus chat about the police, and then we'll see each other.
Yes, but also Whitney Houston and Jasmine Sullivan, I'm going to say. Those are my thoughts on that.
All right. We'll see each other soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.